Today we have a GPU that might not be new, but trust me, it's the one you want to get hyped about. Say hello to the AMD Radeon 7900 GRE, also known as the Golden Rabbit Edition. The name might raise an eyebrow or two, but there's a good reason behind it. Initially exclusive to the Chinese market, this card is finally making its debut to the rest of the world. And let me tell you, AMD isn't playing around. They've slapped on a super competitive price tag starting at just $549 US. Judging by the performance we're about to uncover, this might be the new mid-range champion. Let's get into it. The 7900 GRE is based on the latest RDNA 3 architecture from AMD, and it features 80 compute units with 80 Ray accelerators and 160 AI accelerators. AMD has also placed 16GB of GDDR6 memory clocked at 18 gigabits on 256-bit bus. While this is clearly a cut-down version of a 7900 XT and XTX, it still has 260 watt total board power, but our card actually pushed past that. More on that later on. In this video, we'll focus on competitive pricing of this GPU in comparison to the other current gen cards on the market. Let's jump straight into performance benchmarks, skipping 1080p results due to the inconclusive outcomes caused by the CPU bottlenecks. At 1440p in Shadow of a Tomb Raider, the AMD RX 7900 GRE delivers impressive performance, achieving an average of 160 FPS and 1% lows of 142 FPS. Compared to the Nvidia RTX 4070, the AMD card takes the lead, with roughly 7% increase in average FPS and 6% in 1% lows. Interestingly, the Nvidia RTX 4070 Super finds middle ground, presenting an average of 171 FPS and 1% lows of 147 FPS. This positions it 7% ahead in average FPS and 4% in 1% lows compared to the AMD RX 7900 GRE, indicating a close race between these models. However, the Nvidia RTX 4070 Ti Super elevates the competition, outperforming the 7900 GRE by approximately 25% in average FPS and 23% in 1% lows, a gap that is hard to ignore for those seeking a dominant 1440p performance. Stepping up the resolution to 4K, the 7900 GRE continues to impress. Against Nvidia RTX 4070, it is 7% faster in average FPS and 8% in 1%. The Nvidia RTX 4070 Super finds its stride as well, posting an average of 90 FPS and 82 FPS on 1%, outperforming the 7900 GRE by 7% in average FPS and 5% in 1% lows, offering a viable alternative for 4K gaming. In Horizon Zero Dawn at 1440p, the 7900 GRE achieves an average of 160 FPS and 1% low of 124 FPS. The RTX 4070 comes close with an average of 151 FPS and 1% lows of 116 FPS, trading the 7900 GRE by 5% and 6% respectively. Here, RTX 4070 Super slightly edges out with an average of 163 FPS and 1% low of 118. Just 2% higher in average FPS compared to the 7900 GRE, but 5% lower in 1%. However, it's worth noting that RTX 4070 Super comes with a higher price tag. At 4K resolution, the 7900 GRE continues to deliver with 89 FPS on average and 1% lows of 81 FPS. The RTX 4070 again falls behind, providing 83 FPS on average and 1% low of 76 FPS, which is 7% less in both metrics compared to the 7900 GRE. Switching gears to the games with ray tracing enabled, here we have F1 2022, and at 1440p, the RX 7900 GRE crosses the line with a strong 93 average FPS and 1% lower 59. The RTX 4070 lags behind with 77 average FPS, a 17% decrease, but maintains a similar 1% low with only 2% reduction. The RTX 4070 Super slightly overtakes the 7900 GRE with a 96 FPS average and 67 FPS 1% lows, making a modest 3% improvement in average FPS and a noticeable 12% gain in 1% lows. The 4K results are not too impressive, so we will jump straight into the 1440p with upscaling enabled. And here it holds its own with RTX 4070 Super with DLSS 2, being just about 1% slower on average FPS and 1%. When enabling DLSS 3, the gap widens, but even with SSR 2.0, the performance is really strong here as compared to way more expensive cards. Changing up to Cyberpunk 2077 here, without upscaling we can look at the performance from 1080p with maxed out settings. But unfortunately RX 7900 GRE does not hit the 60 FPS target, so you'd have to either drop the settings or enable FSR. With upscaling though, we can go up to 1440p, and here it sits together with the 7900 XT, which is a higher end AMD card and is considerably more expensive. It is a very specific example though. As we've seen in general, it seems to deliver performance somewhere between RTX 4070 and 4070 Super in gaming. Let's check out some productivity workloads, like Blender Render. Here GRE card finishes the test about 22 seconds faster than 7800 XT, but is about 1.5 minutes slower than RTX 4070 and almost 3 minutes slower than 4070 Super. In DaVinci Resolve benchmark by Puget Systems, the RX 7900 GRE is more competitive with both RTX 4070 cards, especially in Fusion score where AMD cards generally hit way above their weight. Which leads us to the card specific stats. These numbers are for our sample card, which is the Power Color Hellhound. In Time Spy Extreme benchmark, this card was hovering around 2340 MHz, with sometimes peaking around 2400. As far as temps are concerned, we saw it max out at 63 degrees, while being virtually silent at 35 dBA. This was super surprising to me, especially considering the seemingly lackluster cooler design of this card, which felt somewhat cheap. This board is using the same Navi 31 die, which is the larger type, but it is cut down in functionality. Consequently, it generates less heat compared to the models like 7900 XTX, while still benefiting from the same surface area for heat dissipation, resulting in significantly enhanced cooling efficiency. This is basically verified by our power graph, as this card is happy to push way past 300 watts, as measured across the power cables as well as PCIe slot via Nvidia PCAT. When we look at the overall average across the whole benchmark, it comes up to 284 watts, which is just shy of 4070 Ti Super from Nvidia. When it comes to performance per watt, it is sitting together with the 7800 XT and is outmatched by all Nvidia cards from this generation. To summarize, I am really glad to see the RX 7900 GRE making its debut in the rest of the world. If AMD maintains its pricing strategy and partner cards remain close to MSRP, this GPU presents a compelling option for competitive 1440p gaming without upscaling, and even delivers solid performance for higher end 4K gaming with upscaling enabled, all while undercutting Nvidia alternatives in terms of cost. While it may still lag behind on ray tracing titles, the overall value proposition is still very impressive. What are your thoughts on this card? Is GRE card a great buy, or will AMD get wrecked? If you want to check out any of the items covered in the video, the links are in the description below. I hope you found this useful. Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe for more. We'll see you guys in the next one.